survivor of what one student called a terrorist who unleashed terror inside their school. We heard a lot of emotional pleas for change. We heard a lot of emotional pleas for what types of change they'd like to see. And the last student pointing to mental health there was talking about putting it into the system so that it gets maybe a mental health test somehow for consideration when someone goes to buy a gun. These kids have given a lot of thought to this, and they shared some really jarring stories about what they went through and where they were. There was one young man who spoke first, who said that initially, because of either his height, some kind of look about him, that people thought that he was actually the shooter. Police officers, he said, stopped him. Other students did. And it was a terrifying look at what it meant to be inside that school, already dodging bullets, but to have others think that this might be the killer. Amazing things that we learned, many of it for the first time from some of these students. Let's go to our reporter now, Rich Edson, who joins us live from Tallahassee. Rich, that was incredibly emotional.
Yeah, it was. And you think about what these kids have to live with for the rest of their lives and the testimonies that we've heard from them, that ongoing inside the buildings in this complex. We're outside, and that's where people from all over this community have come. Students not only from the local high school here, but from Florida State and Florida A&M. Gun control advocates, parents, others, workers coming here for a rally at the old State House here. There was a small group from Stoneman Douglas High School that walked through here a short while ago to the applause of this group. Some onlookers were in tears at that, they say, because of the students' bravery. This is the old state capitol. Florida built a new one in the 1970s right behind here, and that's where the bulk of the legislating happens in Florida, and that's where the Stoneman Douglas students are right now lobbying. They say they are pushing for school safety that also involves gun control with other measures. After traveling hundreds of miles, many coming from the funerals of their classmates, these teenage lobbyists say they're begging for common sense laws to address this terror.
We obviously know change isn't going to happen today. We just want to change their mindset and kind of put them in our place and show them what it was like to be trapped in a school, not knowing if we were going to walk out.
We aren't being taken seriously enough. Now, I personally don't know the steps that we're going to have to take, but once we figure that out, we're going to take them, and you better believe we're going to take them as soon as possible.
Florida House lawmakers yesterday rejected a motion to bring up a bill to ban assault rifles. The Senate President's office tells us they still plan to work on a few gun-related bills with the goal of getting legislation to Governor Scott this session. Measures on banning anyone younger than 21 years old from buying an assault rifle, mandating a 3-day waiting period to buy those weapons, allowing judges to grant restraining orders to prevent someone from having a firearm, and more money for school safety and other initiatives. Now, the Florida legislature is only in for about 2 more weeks, and they only meet once a year. So they've got a couple of weeks to address this session. Then they'll have to wait for next year unless they call a special session. Harris, back to you.
Yeah, I had a Democrat on earlier this week, and I said, you know, if you feel so strongly, why not do that special session? I was also reading today that there are other things that are going through the legislature down in Florida right now that have to do with this issue, dealing with mental health. You heard the students talking about that. So there is more work to be done. There is the compunction to do it. Let's see if they'll extend that calendar in order to get it done. We, of course, can't read the tea leaves on that, but we know how important this is across the country now. So let's see if lawmakers will extend that calendar if they need to, because all of the legislative days are not as long as the 3 weeks that are on the calendar now. Meanwhile, as students are rallying in Tallahassee and across America, President Trump is meeting today with students, parents, and teachers affected by the shootings in Parkland, Sandy Hook, and other shooting tragedies. This, one day after the president signaled he's open to some gun safety measures. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders here.
We haven't closed the door on any front. Again, that's what the next several days and weeks will be, to have conversations and to see what this process looks like and to see what areas we can help make changes to and in what places that we can do better. Yeah. Specifically, I know background checks are something that the president's supportive of, making more efficient and looking at better ways to improve that process. Everybody wants a quick and a simple answer, but there isn't one.
Let's get directly to a student now. From Tallahassee, Parkland survivor David Hogg, who has become one of the high school's most outspoken voices on the need for stricter gun laws. David, thanks for joining us. That was very impactful. First the rally and then the news conference. What is the message that you and your classmates want to get out?
I want to make something clear here. I don't want to infringe upon people's Second Amendment rights in the same way that I don't want people to infringe upon my First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. For example, with freedom of speech, you have clear and present danger where you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. With the Second Amendment, I feel it should be a similar system where if you are a mentally unstable person, where if you are a person that has a criminal background or a history of domestic violence, you should not be able to get a gun. But if you are if you get all those checks and you're cleared by the government, you should be able to own whatever gun you want, essentially.
You know, President Trump right now, and in fact one of his early tweets was about mental health. So he is now putting a plan into action that he would like to see lawmakers enact. Of course, he can't do it all himself. So he has come some distance where other presidents have not. I want to get your thought on that.
So the way that I think President Trump might do things differently, if at all, is I don't know, honestly. I really don't. It's kind of it's a similar situation as to what it was a few years ago, where his party is in control of both the House and Senate. It's a question of whether or not they can actually get something done. Because we're sick and tired of the promises of politicians that they're going to send their prayers and their condolences when we have no action. And that's why you're hearing those cheers behind me. Those are calls to action by the American people saying we are not being represented and we are not going to take this anymore.
Well, as the president gets ready to meet with victims of other tragedies, their parents, those young people today from Sandy Hook and others, one of the things he's talking about directly speaks to the issue of who can get a gun. They're looking at raising the age, and they're looking at those mental health issues and what types of things we as a society can shore up and do, and also at a federal level, what they can do and what they can communicate with those issues. We can't put ourselves in your shoes. But last week, it felt like the whole nation was captive in those moments with you. We were frightened with you. We were praying with you. And I know it's tough sometimes when things don't happen fast enough. So talk to me about going back to school on Tuesday, because that's coming.
It is coming. And honestly, I don't know if I will go back to school until legislation is passed. And as they were saying earlier, this session only lasts so much longer, and these politicians are not going to respond and respect our wishes as American citizens and as citizens of the state of Florida. And as such, they're not going to get reelected in the coming years, and I hope they realize that, especially given what happened yesterday with the bill not being passed, even just to discuss assault weapons. That was extremely offensive, but it's okay because they won't get reelected.
Well, one thing I would say is that there are a lot of other issues that are on the docket that they are going to talk about with regard to this. I have a quick question for you, though, just in terms of your own family background, because, you know, as a nation, we're all learning about you guys. And I know your dad was with the FBI. There were some balls that were horrendously dropped, as we know, by the FBI. Have you talked about that as a family, and what's the take on it?
It shouldn't have happened. None of this should have ever happened. But we need to realize our mistakes and take a step forward as a country and be mature individuals about it. There's nothing that we can do to change what happened in the past, only what happened in the future. It's awful. It shouldn't have happened. But I don't think it's right that President Trump blames the FBI. He is in charge of the bureaucracy. This is my own opinion. He is in charge of the bureaucracy, and as such, he is responsible for the FBI. And as such, he's responsible for what happened with the miscommunications.
You know, it's interesting. He is a president who has tweeted that the FBI is in tatters for a whole host of different reasons. I'm sure he's very well aware of the criticism for that organization as well. A lot in the news don't know how much you know about that.
That's the difference.
Absolutely.
President Trump is in charge
I'm just
of the
putting
FBI.
it out there as part of the factual, the train here.
I know.
Hey,
and can I make one more statement?
Sure.
Okay. I want to make something clear here. We're calling out the NRA a lot, and 99.9% of the people that are in the NRA are responsible, safe gun owners. And I respect them for that. Joining an organization that wants to support safe gun ownership is excellent. What we're arguing against here is the people that are at the top, that are at the oligarchy, that are owning this country and not letting the citizens' voices being heard. That's what we're against. And I think that's what we as Americans, not as Democrats and Republicans, that's what we as Americans need to channel all of our anger and passion into. And that's these corrupt politicians and changing that. Midterms are coming up. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, so long as you support somebody that wants some form and some step of in some sort of direction where we're trying to save these kids' lives, what can be more nonpartisan than that, honestly?
David Hogg, you are a tremendously well-spoken and blessed young man, and I know that a lot of people will say we are praying for you. Please know that we are, and that we mean it. God bless you.
Yeah, please take action, though, as well. Get out and vote.
Thank you, David. Okay. Let's get more reaction now. Let's bring in the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. As parents, we watch that and we have all sorts of thoughts. What are yours?
Well, it's just heartbreaking, and this young man's obviously very well spoken, and they're suffering such an enormous tragedy. I have teenage children, and we never want to see this happen again in our country. So to see the president today take that step of listening to the parents and the victims of these crimes, talking about the whole picture, what are the steps leading up to that child taking on a gun and taking innocent human life. I think we need to talk about the whole picture. Mental health is a part of it. Where was the FBI? How did they not get these warning signals when people came to them about the social media accounts of this young man? And it's an important time to have a national dialogue. We come together in times of tragedy as a country. It's one of the great things about our country. Let's not let this divide us. Let's let it bring us together and make us stronger and better and protect our children.
Amen to that. You and I both have emotion around this. I can see the tears in your eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can see it in mine. We've been listening to these young people for the better part of an hour. What you're talking about is putting everything in the forefront that matters, putting everything aside. One of the young teenagers today said, you know, we're not afraid of re-election or not being re-elected. And it's bravery, though, that takes that. Do you have more confidence than ever that this is the tipping point?
Well, I think our leaders are going to come together. This is not a partisan issue. Nobody wants to see something like what just happened in Parkland, Florida, happen anywhere across the country. We do have to have conversations. We need to address mental health in this country. We need to address our system of warning about individuals who look like they're going to do harm, and how do we prevent them from being able to do harm, prevent them from being able to buy guns. I think there's a lot of places that people are going to come together. Nobody wants somebody with a mental illness to be able to purchase a gun and do harm. So let's have that conversation, but let's not let it divide us. Let's let it bring us together, which is what's the best thing that our country always does in tragedy. We come together.
You mentioned the president. I've been saying this all afternoon as we've been covering, as we've been offering up live coverage of what's going on from the rally to the news conference. This president, and being specific, enumerating things that he wants to change in terms of gun safety, and I would imagine in some ways also hearing from lobbyists and everybody else, because everybody's got power in Washington, has come away with a certain kind of a list that has all of these things in it. And I'm not saying that other presidents didn't have a heart to be there and to offer up condolences. That's not what he's doing. Separate from that, he's doing something else.
Yeah, and he's listening, and he's saying, let's look at everything. Everything needs to be on the table. We need to talk about the whole picture and come together as Americans and protect our children. And that's what he's doing today by listening to these victims. I think a huge part of it is listening, and that's important that our president listens to these victims of these shootings and then come up with solutions that we can come together on. As Democrats and Republicans.
Well, it is a great opportunity to have you as the chairwoman of the RNC today. Any occasion we get that opportunity is great, but specifically today, because I know you've been talking with the leadership and you're hearing what is possible. And I know that young man was upset because the legislature didn't go forward with things. But I mean it when I say there's a list of things that they're looking at and they don't have much time to do it. I'm hopeful that they'll build out some time to do it. Let's talk about where Republicans are right now. Versus Democrats, just in terms of going toward the midterm elections. Something has changed. Yeah. There's been a sea change, and the color is green of the ocean. What's happening?
Well, the RNC has done phenomenally well with fundraising, and a lot of that's because of the popularity of this tax cut and what it's doing for our economy. It's lifting people. People are finally seeing their incomes rise. Jobs are coming back to this country. Our country is on the rise, and everyone is benefiting from it. And so, as a Republican Party, we want to build a ground game so that we can keep those majorities, but so that we can keep this comeback, because our country has turned around, and we don't want to go back to where we were with stagnant wages and jobs leaving and 2% growth being the new norm.
You know, that's interesting, that word comeback, because inherent in it is lessons learned.
Yes.
Right? So give me one.
Well, I think the lesson learned is you can't say this is the best we're going to do and this is how well our country's going to be. When President Obama said 2% GDP is the best we're ever going to get, and we built our economic models around that, and President Trump said, we can do better. And he cut regulation at a speedy pace, and then he put tax reform in there for everyone. Every income bracket got a tax cut, and then helped our businesses. And now you have seen this robust economy, and it's helping average families who have seen bonuses or wage increases, and they feel better about our economy, which means they have more money for groceries, they have more money for gas, they have more money to take care of the people they love.
They also have money that they put into the political system because they feel something about it, like an ROI, as they like to say on the Fox Business Network, that return on investment with some of the programs that you're talking about.
Yeah, we had actually, we have a paycheckpresident.com website, and we had a woman the other day say, I'm putting half of my increased paycheck into the RNC because I want to make sure we elect Republicans because they have made my life better. And what is it about when you hire somebody to represent you, essentially, when you vote for them, you want them to deliver on their promises. And by these tax cuts and by the deregulation, and now what we're seeing with our economy doing better, we have delivered on our promises.
I have a real quick last question. I'm going to ask my team just to hang tight for just a second before we go to break. You know, we're seeing some gerrymandering, some redistricting around the country, and Pennsylvania is one of those areas where Republicans could get hurt because Democrats have such an advantage. What will you do?
Well, it is judicial gerrymandering. It's an activist Supreme Court that has taken the maps that the legislature drew with the Republican governor, and the voters elect the legislature, and they've said, well, we don't like what you did. We don't like that the voters chose you to make these maps, so we're going to recreate it. I think that they're going to take it to the Supreme Court. I don't know where that's going to go, but it is a real concern that a judicial branch can overturn the will of the voters.
All right. Rhoda McDaniel, chairwoman of the RNC, up in the mezzanine for the first time.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here.
Thank you. A lot of serious things going on in the world, and
Yeah.
great to get your perspective.
Thanks for having me
here. A look back on the legacy of Reverend Billy Graham, who passed away just a few hours ago. What mark did he leave on the globe? Jerry Falwell Jr., son of the late Reverend Jerry Falwell, joins me later this hour. And House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is warning current and former top officials to comply with Phase 2 of his committee's investigation into the anti-Trump dossier. He's talking about it. He'll talk about that, and we'll get answers. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano will help weigh in.
We're giving them a couple weeks to answer it. You will be subpoenaed, and you will come before Congress to tell us when you knew about this.
Fox News Alert now. New details on the Democrats' FISA memo. Adam Schiff, the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, says he's aiming to have that document made public sometime this week. He says it will rebut a Republican memo which outlines alleged abuses by the FBI and DOJ against the Trump campaign. This as Republicans on the committee are launching Phase 2 of their investigation into that anti-Trump dossier. Chairman Devin Nunes sent a letter. About 24 current and former top officials received it, reportedly including former FBI Director James Comey and former CIA Chief John Brennan. He says he has some questions and he wants answers.
We're asking several former and current officials to answer 10 simple questions, like when did you learn about the dossier? When did you learn that it was paid for by the Democrats? When did you learn that this was a political piece? A part of what we sent out today with the questionnaire with 10 questions on it also is a cover letter that says if you don't answer this, we're giving them a couple weeks to answer it, you will be subpoenaed and you will come before Congress.
And now we cue the judge. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano joins me now. You say that we are in dangerous territory.
Yes,
why?
Because the cherry-picked use of raw intelligence data to tell a political narrative is an improper use of intelligence data, and it will increase a call for the revelation of this. And when you reveal raw intelligence data, you're going to reveal methods and sources and people that acquire this, and the American people will be quite sobered, very sobered, when they find out that Big Brother is watching and doing everything we do. Stated differently, the use of intelligence data for a political purpose will undermine freedoms in the United States?
All of them.
Intelligence data has to be used to keep us safe, not to win a political argument.
Yeah, so here's my, and I say you're not giving us a list of freedoms, you're saying all freedoms. And here's my sort of curiosity point about it all. We get one memo, we get promise of another memo, and now I feel like I need to know more because I need to know where one starts and one ends.
You're exactly right,
Democrats
Harris.
aren't pushing back necessarily on the facts of the first one, but now they want their 10-pager out. And
let's just say that between my fingers here is all the raw data. Devin Nunes and
the truth.
Right, Devin Nunes, and this consists of transcripts of phone conversations,
right,
emails, texts, secret briefings, secret filings.
Okay.
Devin Nunes and the Republicans looked at all this stuff, came out with their version.
Okay.
Adam Schiff and the Democrats looked at all this stuff, came out with their version. The versions are the opposite. The American people are entitled to know who's telling the truth. The American people are going to want to see all this stuff. And the people who acquire this for us risk their lives to acquire it.
See, that's what I want to talk about, that now the hunger to want to see the evidentiary support for both these memos. I've been hanging out with you with those words.
It's a great word.
But I don't know. You know, they'll redact some of it, so then the question is how much of it will really support either one. I don't know how much of that we need to necessarily see. And what you're saying is the gathering and giving it up makes us unsafe in terms of our freedom.
Yes, yes. The use of it for political purposes makes us unsafe.
So what do we do in this instance?
Well, one side started this. The Republicans started this with their memo, and now the Democrats are entitled to answer. The president has said he will declassify much of the Democratic memo because he believes that both sides
well, he said transparency
should come out. Yes,
right.
Yes, exactly.
So,
the American public should not be treated like children. On the other hand, people risk their lives to acquire national security data for us, and they're not going to risk their lives if they know this stuff's going to be made public all the time.
Let's talk about the underlying reason why Republicans wanted to see what we saw, because some of it was very jarring.
Okay. Because of the secret FISA court, which on a very, very low standard authorizes surveillance on people who are communicating with foreign persons. The person in this case is an American named Carter Page. The allegation is that in order to listen to Mr. Page's phone calls, the FBI and the DOJ submitted a political piece called the dossier to a federal
judge. Paid for in part by the DNC and Hillary Clinton.
Didn't tell the federal judge that this was paid for by the DNC or whoever and that it was a political piece. And the judge fell for it and used it as a basis for authorizing the warrant.
So would you say that there are some times that we need to see that information that you say pits the hunger for it up against the people who gave their lives to get it?
This is what happens when you have a secret court and you have nobody on the other side. You need somebody resisting it. If there was an adversary in that court to challenge the document that was sent to
Why
the
don't
judge,
we have that?
the judge would have seen. Wait a minute.
Why don't we
You're
have
giving me
that?
something that was prepared by the Democrats,
Can't we fix that?
and you're claiming that it's legitimate intel?
Why can't we fix that? Put somebody there.
All those proposals to have somebody there to challenge the applications to the FISA court have all been defeated. That would make things a lot fairer, Harris.
That would make things fair.
Yes.
Judge Andrew Napolitano, for the education of us all, thank you.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. President Trump is set to hold a listening session today at the White House amid the growing national debate about guns after the Florida school massacre. Our power panel will weigh in. Plus, remembering the life and the legacy of the Reverend Billy Graham, who transformed American faith life. The president of Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr., son of the late Reverend Jerry Falwell, will join me to talk about Graham's ministry that affected the lives of millions.
Religion without a personal encounter with Jesus Christ will not save the soul, and it will not bring the peace that your soul longs for.
We come in on a developing story on this Wednesday. New reaction to the death of the legendary Christian evangelist Billy Graham. His famous sermons are estimated to have reached hundreds of millions of people around the globe during his influential ministry. The Reverend also counseled U.S. presidents for decades, going back to Harry Truman. Earlier, President Trump tweeted this: "The great Billy Graham is dead. There was nobody like him. He will be missed by Christians in all religions. A very special man." Eric Shawn is live with the latest on this. Eric?
Hello, Harris. Yes, he was considered the most influential and well-known Christian evangelist, a pastor to presidents and to so many for so many decades around the world. As you said, Reverend Billy Graham passed away this morning at 7:46. He was at his home in Mount Treat, North Carolina. He suffered from cancer and pneumonia, and at his library in Charlotte, North Carolina, visitors paid tribute.
We know he's not God.
That's right.
We know he's smiling down, and he left a beautiful legacy, and so I think we can rejoice today,
yes,
for sure.
Well, Reverend Graham energized American religious life through his mesmerizing speeches and his activism, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ in his crusades, simulcasts, and rallies in 185 countries. You know, he reached millions through the pioneering use of primetime telecasts, network radio, newspaper columns, and films. He spread his message to more people than anyone in history with this simple message.
I do not believe that any man can solve the problems of life without Jesus Christ.
He was dubbed America's pastor. He gave spiritual counsel to every U.S. president from Harry S. Truman to Barack Obama. Today, Vice President Mike Pence also honored him.
His ministry and his matchless voice changed the lives of millions and inspired our nation. Billy Graham ever reminded us to look to the ancient truths of God's Word.
Reverend Graham said he first felt the Spirit at age 16. He left his family's dairy farm in North Carolina to attend Bible college in Florida, and that's when he started preaching on the streets of Tampa before he took on the whole world.
If you remember nothing that I say tonight, except one thing I want you to remember: God loves you.
Well, a private funeral is planned at the library in Charlotte. Billy Graham, an inspirational American icon who will still live on within so many. Harris.
Eric, Sean, thank you. For more now, let's bring in my next guest, Jerry Falwell, Jr., president of Liberty University, whose father was also a well-known evangelist, the late Reverend Jerry Falwell. Mr. Falwell, great to see you today. I'm sorry that it's under these circumstances, but I want to get your thoughts, first of all, just reaction to the passing of Reverend Graham.
Well, it's obvious the Christian faith has lost the greatest communicator that it had over the last century. He literally took the message to billions of people that, that even though we're all sinners, that we have hope for eternal life through faith in Jesus Christ. And I think that gave so many people just, it's inspired so many people, and it gave so many people a reason to live and to move on with their lives no matter what their circumstances. And there's never been anybody like him. He focused totally on evangelism. He was friends of all presidents, Republicans, Democrats during his lifetime, but he wasn't comfortable with politics. He didn't build a college like my father did here, but he was one of my father's mentors, and he was an inspiration to so many. It's definitely the end of an era for Christianity.
You know, I know that he inspired so many, as you say. I'm curious your thoughts about how he changed the way we talk about faith in America.
He just focused on the redemptive nature of the faith of Jesus Christ, about how we're all equally bad, we're all sinners, but that we have the vicarious death of Jesus on the cross to redeem us and to give us eternal life. And that message is a simple gospel, but nobody could communicate it like he did. I watched the Netflix show The Crown the other night, and even Queen Elizabeth took notice of, and talked about how he illuminated the scripture like nobody she'd ever heard when he came to England back in the, I don't know if it was 50s or 60s, and she invited him over to Buckingham Palace, and that's the impact he had on everybody. He had a gift of communication that nobody else that in the Christian faith ever had, and I think he used it. He was gone all the time. His wife raised the kids. His kids are good friends of mine. His grandkids were students here at Liberty University, and now his great-grandkids attend Liberty University. But the whole family is a wonderful family, and they give their mom the credit for stepping in so that he could do the work that he did to change the world.
You know, you talk about how he didn't want to get into politics, but we showed video of him in the 1960s, and that was a tumultuous time, as you know, with civil rights in this country. He met with Martin Luther King Jr., Pope John Paul II. He reached out to people in every corner, race, religion. He made such a difference at a time when we were talking past each other, to put it in a way, in this country.
He did. He did, and he wasn't divisive. He didn't take sides. He just, his gift was to preach the gospel, and he knew that anything else he did would take away from that. Others of us have other gifts, and we focus in other areas, but that was his true gift of communication, and so he saw anything else, that politics or whatever, as a distraction from that, and that was just his way, and that everybody respected it, and you know, it was unique to him.
You know, you talk about his legacy, his children, grandchildren being on the campus of Liberty University, where you are now president. What will happen across campus today? I don't know if everybody watching knows the faith-based nature of your university and how many of our leaders have attended there or visited there.
Well, a lot of Christian leaders today either were converted by Billy Graham's ministry or by someone who had been converted under Billy Graham's ministry, including my father. And a lot of students here are not old enough to really remember when I was a kid, all the primetime TV shows would be preempted when Billy Graham had a crusade for 3 or 4 nights in a row, and everybody would watch. And I don't think they weren't alive to see the impact. Now there's hundreds of TV stations. Back then there were only 3, and so he was able to reach countless millions of people that would really be impossible today. And it's, you know, he was a household name decades ago, and our students know about the history, but they didn't live it like I did and like others my age or older did. And I think but his impact is being seen through people who were converted by him or by others who had been converted by him, and our students are well aware of that. It's a sad day here on campus.
I can understand. Jerry Falwell Jr. joining us from Liberty University. We appreciate you sharing your memories of Billy Graham and your experiences there on campus with his legacy. Thank you very much.
He was our commencement speaker in 1997. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
When his first grandson graduated.
How about that? You have given us some great details. We so appreciate it and your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we move on, I do want to mention that President Trump and Billy Graham, from my notes I know, met just one time that I know of, and it was for Billy Graham's 95th birthday back in 2013. It was at that birthday party. The President and First Lady have just issued a statement. I'll read you but a paragraph of it. Melania and I join millions of people around the world in mourning the passing of Billy Graham. Our prayers are with his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all who worked closely with Reverend Graham in his lifetime ministry. The statement goes on from the First Lady and the President. Billy Graham was truly one of a kind. Christians are people of all faiths and backgrounds will miss him dearly. We are thinking of him today, finally at home in heaven.